in major line of fire. Xi reprimanded by elders. China's economy slowing down. Real estate sector collapsing. Military meltdown in rocket force. Xi's G20 insecurity, now big headline. That is our top focus on India Today.
The Chinese President Xi Jinping is in the line of fire in Beijing. Xi Jinping, as President of China, head of the Central Military Commission and the General Secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, is considered the most powerful man in China after Chairman Mao. However, a report in Nikkei Asia claims Xi Jinping got an unprecedented reprimand from party elders for the Chinese economy being in tailspin, the collapse of the real estate sector, and the purge in PLA rocket force. The report also suggests Xi Jinping is staying away from the G20 summit because he fears tough questions on the Chinese economy. And that's our top story.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is in the line of fire at home. Considered the most powerful leader in China after Chairman Mao, Xi Jinping, according to a report in Nikkei Asia, was reprimanded by elders of the Chinese Communist Party over the economic situation in China and rising joblessness. The elders, led by former Vice President Zheng Qinghong, made their displeasure very clear. The report says the Communist Party fears it could face unprecedented threat to its rule if the turmoil continues. This is the first time that the Chinese president, who's also the head of the Central Military Commission and the General Secretary of the Communist Party, has faced this kind of wrath of the elders.
At the core of what is happening in China is that the people don't trust their government. So the most significant statistic I've seen about the Chinese economy is that in the last 5 or 7 years, household savings have gone up 50%. In other words, people are putting their money in savings accounts. Effectively, they're hiding it in mattresses. Why? Because they don't believe the government will be able to handle the real estate situation. They don't believe the government will be able to handle the debt overhang. And most importantly, they don't believe the government is being honest with them.
Chinese President Xi Jinping is also in the line of fire for trouble in China's elite rocket force after a purge of top generals. In the first week of August, President Xi Jinping dismissed 2 of the senior-most generals in the People's Liberation Army rocket force, which oversees China's land-based missile and nuclear arsenal, reportedly on allegations of corruption. The double whammy of troubled economy and purge in the rocket force has hit Chinese morale.
चीन एक देश के रूप में एक विस्तारवादी देश है, हमेशा नेगेटिव डिप्लोमेसी का प्रयोग करता है और आज सिर्फ अमेरिका ही नहीं, पूरा विश्व इस बात को मान रहा है कि G20 जैसे जो अंतर्राष्ट्रीय मंच हैं, वहां शिरकत ना करके या जब एक कंसेंसस बन रही होती है किसी मुद्दे को लेकर के उसमें शामिल ना होकर के चीन इस तरह के मंचों को हतोत्साहित करने का काम करता है.
Sluggish economy and declining foreign investment are not President Xi Jinping's only troubles, according to the report. President Xi is seen to be skipping the G20 summit in India to avoid losing face. He fears China's economy and need for rules-based order may be discussed at the summit, where he may increasingly feel isolated in the meeting of democracies. Xi Jinping fears facing tough questions on the Chinese economy. To add to China's troubles, there has been no breakthrough in the stalled talks with the United States, despite the visit of US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo. Xi Jinping not coming for the G20 summit clearly puts China in the dock. Bureau Report, India Today.
Chinese Communist Party elders told President Xi Jinping, according to this report, that the party could face unprecedented threat to its rule if this turmoil continues in China. So Xi Jinping clearly not in control of the situation. China's real estate sector, that's in a shambles. Youth unemployment rate is apparently so alarmingly high that China stopped putting out numbers. Trade is sluggish, foreign investment is declining. Another major worry for China, no breakthrough in trade talks with the United States of America or boundary talks with India. US Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo, she traveled to China, but according to analysts, no gifts for China from this visit. No concessions from India on border talks with China either. So Xi Jinping increasingly appears to be isolated and cornered.
Chinese President Xi Jinping, in his third term, will give the G20 summit in New Delhi a miss.
At the invitation of India, Premier of the State Council Li Xiang will attend the 18th G20 summit held in New Delhi.
Instead, his next big global appearance would be the Belt and Road Forum in Beijing. This would also be his first absence from a G20 summit since taking charge in 2012. China is cornered on its own turf, as much as it is at the receiving end of the Western bloc led by the USA. Xi Jinping has a big economic crisis on his hands. In the summer of 2023, graduating Chinese students flooded social media with images of them posing as corpses. Others appeared to bin their graduation thesis in an act of despair. Unemployment rate of educated youth in China soared to 21.4% in June, when the 11.6 million newly minted college students were poised to enter the job market. The Chinese real estate sector is grappling with staggering losses. Banks are facing sluggish growth, and manufacturing activity has been shrinking for months. China's largest developer, Country Garden, posted a $6.7 billion loss for the first half of 2023. Country Garden's debt is reportedly above $150 billion. Another major Chinese developer, Evergrande Group, is also struggling. The company is reportedly laden with over $300 billion in debt, posting a total of $81 billion in losses for 2021 and 2022. Additionally, it reported a further loss of $4.53 billion for the first 6 months of this year. That's not all. Data of the National Bureau of Statistics indicates that the manufacturing sector in China contracted for the 5th consecutive month in August. World's largest bank by total assets, the Industrial and Commercial Bank of China Limited and the Bank of China both posted sluggish profit growth for the first half of 2023. And Xi needs to stoke all these jarred nerves. He did so with his BRICS summit domination in Johannesburg in August. Belt and Road Forum is his pet project, so October is his golden opportunity. The G20 summit in New Delhi under India's presidency does not exactly sit neatly in the scheme of things for Xi Jinping. Because G20 will raise uncomfortable questions like Chinese aggression against Taiwan and South China Sea. It's bonhomie with Moscow at a time when the Western world is unitedly standing by Ukraine.
I am disappointed, but I'm going to get to see it.
China has officially claimed that it attaches great importance to the G20 summit and hopes for better global cooperation resolution coming out of it. But it looks like that the rise of India and its global stature is making Xi Jinping uncomfortable. Bureau Report, India Today.
So what are ground realities in Beijing? The Nikkei report insists unprecedented reprimand for Xi Jinping over state of economy. Xi Jinping fears he will be questioned on economy if he comes for G20. Let's try and make sense of some of these developments. Sushant Sareen is a senior fellow at the Observer Research Foundation. He joins me on the show. Sushant Sareen, what do you make of this report? Because Xi Jinping appears to have skipped G20 to avoid losing face. China's apprehension is democracies may question China on the state of economy, and Xi Jinping fears being isolated in this powerful group of democracies and economies.
So Gaurav, the journalist who filed this report is somebody with long years of experience, very good contacts. So I would imagine that this is a credible report. This is not a propaganda report. And quite clearly, all the numbers and all the other information coming out of China suggests that all is not well inside the Middle Kingdom. And there is growing pressure on Xi Jinping. Of course, today's report tells us that it's coming from within the party, from strong factions within the party. There is growing opposition. That does not mean that Xi Jinping's position in China is shaky or there is any threat to him, any imminent threat to him. But it does mean that now the voices against him are growing. People are warning him, not because these are reformers or any such thing, but because they feel that if the current trajectory or downward trajectory continues, then the party's dominance over China will come into question. So there is that pressure which is growing, and there's very little reason to doubt it. Again, on the economic front, the real estate sector, that bubble is bursting, and the debt overhang on the real estate sector, I don't know how they're going to be able to manage it, given the other problems which are already existing in the Chinese economy. As far as the G20 is concerned,
it's not. Okay, I'll just come to G20 in a moment. It's not just the Chinese economy. Last week, there were reports of a purge in China's rocket force, top generals being removed, serious charges of corruption being leveled against top generals, and the buck again, as you know better, Sushant Sareen, stops with President Xi Jinping. He is the Central Military Commission's head and the force behind the rocket force.
Not only that, he is also the person who's believed to have appointed and selected these officials, posted them out there, and then suddenly, he has had to sack them for reasons of corruption. But that corruption could also mean something much more sinister. And it's not just these two guys from the rocket force. He virtually handpicked the foreign minister, who within weeks he had to sack. So, questions are going to be raised and are probably being raised in that opaque system on the kind of choices Xi Jinping is making. So clearly that is also adding a lot of political pressure to the growing economic pressures which are already there in the Chinese system. But again, anybody who's predicting the demise of China or the collapse of China or the collapse of the Chinese economy, I think those are highly exaggerated. We have to recognize that the Chinese economy has strengths. But yes, there is this looming crisis, and it won't be easy for the Chinese to come out of it.
So now let's talk about the G20. It's an $18 trillion economy that chooses to stay away. Would you look at it as some are as a snub to India, $3.75 trillion economy, or is this fear or apprehension, as this report seems to make out, that powerful democracies, the United States, India, perhaps some European countries, Australia, they will push back against an expansionist China and seek a rules-based order?
Gaurav, quite clearly, even as far as the G20 is concerned, you can sense the growing isolation of China, which used to be the toast of G20 as the largest or the fastest growing economy in the world, a kind of a growth engine for the rest of the global economy. You've seen, that romance of China die down. You've seen the growing isolation of Xi Jinping. You've seen a major pushback coming from other economies, coming from other big countries which are, getting into strategic contestation with the Chinese. You are seeing that the Chinese are being pushed into a corner. We have also seen that the Chinese alliance with the Russians, for example, hasn't really added any real weight to China as far as the global economic system is concerned. So there are issues on that front. On the India front, there have been some reports. Again, I cannot, vouch for the veracity of these reports, but there have been some reports that Xi Jinping wanted some concessions on the LSE from Mr. Modi, and in exchange he would grace, and I say this with all the sarcasm I can muster, he would grace India with his presence. I don't think any Indian gives a damn whether Xi Jinping comes or not, and clearly he overshot. You know, he thought that we were going to be falling over ourselves so that he would come to India. We don't give a damn whether he comes to India or not. So clearly Mr. Modi didn't bite.
Yes, shouldn't he have seen the writing on the wall after India held a virtual SCO that India wouldn't give Beijing a platform, and that's why a virtual SCO summit was held where India again was the chair? Is this, I mean, are there serious illusions of grandeur when it comes to Xi Jinping, his assessment of a situation? You know, he thought he could browbeat India despite Mamalapuram, and Wuhan bonhomie, and that didn't happen. India pushed back. Democracies, are they really pushing back? What do you make of, U.S. Commerce Secretary Gina Raimondo's visit to China, and China seeing no gift in that trip?
So, just to correct you, Gaurav, it's not illusions of grandeur, it's delusions of grandeur in the case of Mr. Xi Jinping, quite clearly. And I think if he actually thought that there would be some gift from India's side, he was badly advised, or, he simply doesn't understand how the rest of the world functions. Number one. Number two, the same would apply to the Americans as well. I think the Chinese have seen the American keenness to engage with the Chinese to try and solve or sort out some of the rough edges which have come into the relationship, at least at the economic level. They've seen it as American weakness. And so they expect that if the Americans engage with them, they can push the Americans and extract concessions. That's not happened. And clearly, that was also a kind of a setback to the Chinese, because they thought that, okay, fine, if the Americans are so keen, maybe, we can push them hard enough and they'll give in. That has not happened. And there is a major pushback coming from the American side. I think what the Americans are doing is taking a leaf out of the Chinese playbook, which is to talk softly but carry a big stick. And we are seeing signs of that big stick in the kind of alliances and partnerships that the Americans are striking around the world, and particularly in the Indo-Pacific region. So clearly that is something which is also spooking the Chinese.
Okay. Sushant Sareen, for joining me here, many thanks. And we will, over the next several days, continue to talk about China facing these very serious headwinds and India growing on the world stage. G20 is India's moment. And it's not just G20. Yes, India is working very hard. Prime Minister Narendra Modi, his entire team. Remember, the Prime Minister also heads to ASEAN and East Asia Summit. India very successfully, one, pushing back against China, two, emerging as the voice of the developing world and taking them along instead of China that actually bullies developing countries and virtually beats them into submission the way it tried, almost successfully with Pakistan and a little successfully with countries like Sri Lanka. But we will track this story very, very closely. That is all I have for you on this special broadcast. Many thanks for watching. News and updates continue on India Today. Stay with us.